On May 4th, Disney Plus released The Rise of Skywalker. So how did I feel about this movie? Stay tuned to find out. So episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, came out on Disney Plus on May the 4th. It's funny, this is the first time that I didn't feel the need to buy one of the Star Wars movies in some format. I really wasn't in much of a hurry to see it again after I saw it in the theaters. Although it really wasn't the worst of the Star Wars movies, I still say The Last Jedi was the worst. I think J.J. Abrams set it up so that you could continue with a decent story. There were questions to be answered, characters to be developed, which could have made for a nice couple of sequels. And I think Rian Johnson just threw it all away. So to his credit, J.J. Abrams had to correct a lot of things that Johnson had done wrong. He had to undo what Johnson had done. And one of my criticisms of The Rise of Skywalker was that I felt like I was watching two different movies. The first half of the movie went really too fast. It was like Abrams was just clicking off the boxes of all the stuff that he thought Johnson had done wrong. And then the second half of the movie felt more like a Star Wars movie, but even then there were problems. I felt like Abrams engaged in a lot of lazy writing that gave rise to a lot of plot conveniences just to create drama. So let's start with Emperor Palpatine. I know there were a lot of people out there who complained that by putting Emperor Palpatine in this movie, you basically undid the other two movies. I mean, what was the purpose? The problem was that Abrams was painted into a corner. Johnson killed off Snoke, and the first movie, The Force Awakens, had set up a couple of questions that I thought could have been developed well in the sequels. Who was Snoke? Where was he during Palpatine's time? Where did the First Order come from? And Johnson just threw all that away. So by making Palpatine the main villain in this movie, Abrams could explain, Snoke's been a clone all along. Palpatine's been able to control all the puppet strings. The First Order was all Palpatine's doing. Yeah, it seemed a little convenient, and that's why the movie seemed too fast early on. Abrams just had to throw all these things out there so he could correct all the problems. It's just by bringing Palpatine back, Abrams did cheapen the original trilogy. I mean, Luke, Han, Leia, and Chewie, they brought down the Emperor. What was the point of all that if the Emperor was just going to lay in wait, reassert himself some 40 years later? It's like the original Rebel victory was for nothing. And then we had Rey's training as a Jedi. I mean, it seemed to come from nowhere. But Abrams had to find a way to explain how Rey had become so powerful. Johnson took away the ability of having Luke train her, so the only other solution was to have Leia train her. The problem is that this appeared inconsistent with the characterization of Leia. Leia chose her path. She chose the path of politics. She let Luke be the trainer of the Jedi. And that's when Luke trained Kylo Ren. Well, Ben at that point. So explaining that Luke really did train Leia, and Leia in turn trained Rey, well, that came from nowhere. It was also a problem that Abrams had to undo the bad characterization of Luke that Johnson had done. I mean, here's Luke Skywalker. He was the hero of the universe. Against all odds, he redeemed Darth Vader. Even his Jedi teachers didn't think that was possible. And yet, when Kylo Ren turned to the dark side, Luke just gave up, became a jaded hermit? Yeah, that wasn't possible. So Abrams had to fix that, which is interesting because there were at least two instances where Abrams broke the fourth wall in order to criticize Johnson. Like when Rey was trying to throw away Anakin's lightsaber. And yeah, it was Anakin's lightsaber, not Luke's. Luke built his own lightsaber in Return of the Jedi. It was green. In Star Wars, he was given his father's lightsaber, which was the blue lightsaber that was conveniently in Maz Kanata's possession. The blue lightsaber was Anakin's, not Luke's. But I digress. So Rey tries to throw away Anakin's lightsaber. Luke catches it and tells us that a Jedi's weapon deserves more respect. That was clearly a criticism of Johnson. Later in that sequence, Luke also raises his X-Wing fighter out of the ocean, so Rey could rejoin the battle. And when he does so, he looks into the camera and smiles. Like it was another communication to the audience that, hey, we're back on track. Chewie finally got his medal. That was another breaking of the fourth wall. It's like Abrams was apologizing. Not just for the fact that Lucas ignored Chewie and his contributions to the blowing up of the Death Star, but also to the fact that in The Force Awakens, Abrams essentially ignored Chewie and his relationship to Leia. Chewie didn't get his hug when he came back from Starkiller Base. So then Abrams engaged in a lot of lazy writings in this movie. Now that shouldn't surprise us. After all, The Force Awakens was just a retread of the first Star Wars film. You had a droid who had some information that both sides were looking for. You had a big weapon that could destroy planets. And you had some kind of rebellion or resistance force that had to figure out how to destroy the weapon. Only this time the weapon was bigger. And if you notice that in The Force Awakens, you had the first time that Abrams conveniently came up with a new rule that was able to solve the problem. Now remember, in the first Star Wars movie, the MacGuffin were the plans to the Death Star. The whole point of the movie was that the rebellion had to figure out a way to destroy this thing. But in The Force Awakens, the Resistance figures out a plan to destroy Starkiller Base in about 2 minutes. Surely something that big has an oscillator on it, whatever the heck an oscillator is. Lo and behold, it's got an oscillator. Well, if we can blow up the oscillator, it'll blow up the weapon. Great, let's blow up the oscillator. So it doesn't come as a surprise when Abrams engages in lazy writing in order to create the drama in The Rise of Skywalker. So in The Rise of Skywalker, you have these thousands of Star Destroyers, all with planet-killing weapons that seemingly came from nowhere, along with the thousands of troops and thousands of officers who man those Star Destroyers, and thousands of sycophants of the Emperor who seemingly have nothing better to do than to wait around with the Emperor until his plot gets hatched. And none of this was detected by anyone. That was lazy in of itself. But then we get this new rule. Wow, those Star Destroyers, they can't take off without getting some kind of signal from a navigation tower. Haven't we seen that before? Like the droid army on Naboo that needed to have that droid control ship and just knock out the droid control ship and it killed all the droids. Well, now just knock out the navigation tower and it's going to kill all the Star Destroyers. Please. And for a twist, the Allegiant General can just transfer all those functions to his command ship, making the ground assault harder, creating more drama. Which brings up the whole problem with Allegiant General Pride. Where's he been all this time? We've got 2 movies to this trilogy. We've never seen him. In fact, in the other 2 movies, we were led to believe that this young General Hux was the leader of all of the First Order's military. Now there's a new hierarchy. Also, Abrams can engage in that tiresome trope that there's a spy from within the bad guys, which just happens to be General Hux. Bad writing. So then we have this new rule that affected Threepio. You know, the protocol droid who's fluent in over 6 million forms of communication, and being able at least to recognize an Imperial code gave the rebels something of an advantage. Well, here's a new rule. He can translate a Sith language. He just can't reveal it. What? Well, this was a new rule that came into being during the Republic. Really? Threepio had his mind wiped after the Clone Wars, and somehow that bit of programming stayed behind? How convenient. Because this convenient new rule drives another subplot. The quest to try to find a way to translate the Sith writing. I should note here also the other implausibility. All this stuff had to be done in 16 hours. Which is fortunate, because apparently now hyperspace travel is instantaneous. So now we got all these cool new Force abilities. Like the power to use the Force to heal. Wow, that could have come in handy during the Clone Wars. Although I do have to say, this particular ability was played up really well when we came to it in The Mandalorian. Remember, Baby Yoda healed at least 2 people. And it led to Carl Weathers' character helping Mando. So the other Force ability? Apparently you can have entire conversations and even battles with another Force user who's light years away. No need to rack up the hologram bill. Just tap into the Force. And it's like he's in the room with you. He can even grab stuff off your person or near you, so he can conveniently figure out where you are And so you can conveniently give him one of the two lightsabers that you just happen to have to fight the Emperor. Now, there was new explanation of the Force that I kind of liked. And that was the idea that all the Sith Lords lived on in the current Sith Lord. That there was apparently some kind of reincarnation that was going on. Remember, the rule of two was introduced in the Phantom Menace. There was always two with the Sith, a Lord and an apprentice. And then the Lord knew sooner or later the apprentice was going to become so powerful that he was going to murder the Lord and become the new Sith Lord. Now, why would Sith Lords tolerate this system? Well, now that makes sense. They tolerate it because they get reincarnated in the new Sith Lord. I like that. But what's up with this dyad with the Force? Where did that come from? Again, just another new convenient rule that made the Emperor stronger and created more drama. Lazy writing. And then we had all these Star Destroyers everywhere in the galaxy, blowing up and causing celebrations. How did that happen? I mean, obviously, Abrams wanted to create the ending that Lucas tapped on to Return of the Jedi, when he ruined it when he went back for the new editions. But there was no explanation that there were other battles involving Star Destroyers happening simultaneously with the Battle of Exegol. I did like that final scene with Lando. 70-year-old man wearing a wig, still got it going with the ladies, flirting with the young Janna. When he did that, I felt like saying, Colt 45 works every time. I also liked how the story ended where everything began on the moisture farm on Tatooine. The problem was that weird ending where Rey adopts the Skywalker name. It was just confusing and contrived. Final thoughts, I liked how they brought back Wedge. He had actually resisted. He didn't want to be involved in the final trilogy, but Abrams wanted the people who were involved, even in small roles and behind the scenes, to have a final appearance in this movie. John Williams, for example, got himself a nice cameo. So The Rise of Skywalker wasn't a great movie, but it wasn't the worst of the Star Wars movies. I was trying to think if it could be corrected. The way the final season of the Clone Wars went back to try to correct all the problems with Revenge of the Sith, I just don't know if it's possible. There was some really bad, inconsistent writing throughout those last three movies, and I'm not sure I'm going to watch them as often as I watched the first trilogy. My name's Bill Kovac. I'm the creator and primary contributor to the dantooinefreepress. I'm also fighting cancer, and while I'm getting better, the fight has left me disabled. I'm trained as a lawyer, but I'm going to spare you the gross details of why it's not a good idea for me to go into court. Even with decent health insurance, I have tremendous medical bills. If you feel generous enough to make a small one-time donation, you can do so through PayPal. I'll have instructions in the description below. A non-tax deductible donation will go to a special needs trust set up for my benefit that will help pay my expenses. Thank you for watching. Please consider subscribing to our channel and give us a like. Let us know in the comments below what topics you would like to see in the future. And hit that bell button if you would like to receive notification of whenever we release a new video.